Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Mana on the Rocks. It is I, Joe. Joining me this week, as always, the guy who has his ringer on, Atlas.
That's me. Hello, everybody.
This week, it's been a minute. It's been a minute since we had someone on the show that wasn't us two dingalings. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Sam. Sometimes people on the internet call me Frosty, or Frosty with an EH. I am a Turbo Naus player out of Boise, Idaho.
Turbo Naus, we don't deal with y'all here. No, we wanted to bring Sam on to talk a little bit of shop, talk about the side of the game that me and Atlas don't really find ourselves being in the driver's seat of. What better way to do it than bring on one of the best players who in this area that we know. But speaking of knowledge is power. Atlas, what kind of knowledge do we got to dispense these people this week?
Okay, so for announcements this week, pretty straightforward. For those people in the Washington, Oregon area, the Gabby's Olympic Cards and Comics is doing their quarterly event on November 4th. That's this Saturday. It's a 10 proxy limit, so first time that they're doing that. Once again, printed out on cardstock. Come see us. It's going to be a really good time. We're going to have a lot of really good players there. So join us for that. And then in 2 weeks, we have our regional championships hosted by PDX and CDH. It's going to be in Graham, Washington, 100% proxy legal. It's going to be a 2-day event on the 18th and 19th of November. And that's going to be, that's a 1K. So go ahead and show up and bring your best deck, play your best Magic, and we're looking forward to seeing some really awesome players who've spent a lot of time qualifying on the regional circuit, and then also some people who are just gonna like show up to try and redeem themselves after a couple losses. But then on the note of circuits, the last thing to mention is that Eminence just recently officially announced that they're doing a national circuit of events. It's called Top Deck or Top Deck GG. That's their finder, but they're also doing a circuit for it where different tournaments will be able to register with them so that people playing in those events can score different amounts of points based on the sizing of the event. And if you accumulate enough points, you'll be invited to a very special event. It's like a 25K, I think. It's going to be for the 64 top-ranked players in the nation. So go ahead and look for information on that on Eminence's page. Join the Command Tower server, things like that. You can find a lot of information on it. That'll be a 10-month qualifier circuit. And that national event's going to be, of course, it'll be live streamed and everything. But that's going to be coming up. I think it's in next October. So look forward to that. It's going to be a lot of what we're talking about next year.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. Speaking of talking about, we got to talk about the lucky patron this week. This week, the lucky patron goes out to Meow Sarita. Thank you for supporting us on the Patreon. Appreciate it. You should come on down, get a drink with us.
I don't want to drop one. 28. Very safe
number. No. Okay. You're also a mid-range player, I take it.
I very much. I am the mid-rangiest of players. I'm like just shy of stacks.
Okay, so this is gonna hurt you then. I think that depending on the greediest of greedy decks that have all the reasons to do so, I think can go as low as 23, and I think that the maximum that a Turbo Naus build should have is 26 lands.
No, I can believe that.
No, I mean, that sounds right from the way that I've seen Naus play. It's just one of those things where it's cringe.
Yeah, you will not catch me doing that. That is 100% facts.
I'll hopefully I'm here to clear up a little bit. It's not as crazy as it sounds mathematically. it checks out.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I know that you were helping me with doing some work on my list with the math because you're really good at those, like running those statistics and stuff. And you were talking about like cutting down even how most mid-range lists, or a lot of mid-range lists, could afford to play just like 27 lands, even if they're not playing Turbo Naus.
Yeah, so I don't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head right now, but fun fact for you deck builders out there, 27, 28 lands is actually where you really start hitting diminishing returns on like lands in your opener and just like curving out your land every turn. And so there's not really a math reason to run more than that, I guess, if that makes sense. You will start like not really gaining consistency while losing valuable slots in your deck list.
No, I think we've seen that take off a lot in the past like 2 years or so. Whereas like even just 2 years ago, people were on like 29 and 30 lands and they were like, oh, we don't want to go 28, 27. Because I remember seeing like long time ago when I was playing like Urza and stuff. Like that's a pretty fast deck as far as like you want to vomit your hand and want it to be a lot of like low cost artifacts and stuff. And they were like, oh, we don't want to go down to 28 lands because then we lose those lands in our opener hand that help us cast these artifacts. And you're saying that's not true based on the numbers.
Yeah, and so there's two big things about the Commander format that Turbo Naus gets to abuse. The first one is the life total, right? You start at 40 life. Ad Nauseum was never meant to be cast from 40 life. You draw way more, than was really meant. And the other part is the mulligans, where in Commander we get a way more powerful mulligan than any other format, and that means that we can be way more aggressive with our land counts, knowing that you can, going to 6 is like one card generally doesn't make a difference over the course of a CDH game, so I'm usually very happy with 6 or more. And so you look and you're like, oh, well, in your opening 7, you're probably not going to have that many lands. But when you think about like the first 3 hands, and especially when, you're willing to go lower than that to 4 to 5, like you will almost always find a hand with the mana you need. And that's the other key point, is that mana and lands are not exactly the same thing.
How so? Can you break that down for us?
So I'll go a little deeper into it later, I think, but
okay.
there's a big problem with lands. They have hidden text on them that I hate. They say once per turn, and like that's a real downside that I think gets overlooked a lot when people are deck building. So
what do you mean once per turn? Like the land drop or the activation?
The land drop, where if your goal is to take as many game actions as you can, like and be as explosive as you can in the early turns, then those cards aren't helping you. So we'll divert a little bit. So we're gonna talk about mid-range deck building for like 2 minutes here.
Oh baby, you come to the right spot then.
And then it's gonna come back around later, especially when we get more into the land count, and it all makes sense. So mid-range deck building, like 101, the first rule is maximize your card quality. There's more nuance to it than that, but if your goal is to beat people with card advantage, which is how mid-range decks almost always win in CDH, then a card you can't use is a card you didn't draw. And when you're digging off of a Heuristic or whatever on a combo turn, you need that high density. You need to be finding basically only interaction. You need as few of your cards to be dead as possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so Turbo does not follow that rule exactly. Instead, with Turbo, you are looking for permutations or combinations of cards that will win you the game. It sounds kind of dumb, but that's like really what it comes down to.
That idea makes sense to me.
You want, instead of highest card quality, where you're trying to average out the best turn you can over multiple turns, you just want one really, really good turn. And a lot of times that can be with one land. To an extent, mid-range or Turbo is the most common time to win, is like in the early turns, but really the decks aren't built to be just Turbo as much as they're built to be explosive, and they can really take advantage of any lull in the game state when other people, might not be able to play so aggressively, like right after a board wipe is a good one, where mid-range players generally can't win from an empty board. And so they have to take that turn to like recast their commander, redevelop their pieces, whatever. And you can just like drop a Dark Ritual and an Ad Naus from, 2 lands or whatever and win the game right there. You don't need.
It's a really good point too, because I've actually seen you do this a lot with your signature deck at this point. I would say is Inalla. It's like your baby.
I would say so. Yeah, I would say so.
And I've seen you do that a lot, where it's like you kind of like you have like maybe you have an early start, but whether it's like you just kind of like you're sniffing out a counter spell or something, it's like that you can't beat. Like I've just seen you like sit and wait and like take that like. Look for that window where you're just winning on top of everyone else, because your deck can also do that, where it wins at instant speed.
No, yeah, it's a very similar philosophy to what I have put into Baby Pod, Sans Blue Creature Turbo, where like, sure, the deck can produce like a fast win. I'm totally okay with just sitting there and grinding and just like removing things on the board, but like my tutor density and the ease of access to my 1-card combos is so plentiful. I just need to look for the time. That's literally it. So I totally understand what you mean by like, you don't need you need these specific combinations of cards, but you run a lot of means to get to those cards, or a lot of overlap with those cards that like like you said, you're looking for that window, and you're going to have a high percentage chance of doing that because that's what the deck is engineered to do.
Yeah, exactly. As compared to like a mid-range deck where, especially get to the late game and you're more capable of making your own window. You've just drawn enough interaction that you can force something to resolve, and it doesn't really matter what your opponents have. In a turbo deck, you don't have quite as much, card drawn interaction, so you need to, whenever that window comes up, the deck needs to be ready to make a win attempt. And as a player, you need to too. I think it's really important to recognize, I go for a lot of win attempts on like very like seemingly odd turns, but there's a lot of times where I'm like, if this Dawnwaker player untaps, I'm not winning the game. Like, it doesn't matter, like, what cards I draw, or like, unless they hit the absolute nuts. If this Dawnwaker player untaps with their Seedborn Muse, like, the Kenrith player untaps, like, I'm just not resolving a win con. It doesn't matter. So I go for the win, even if it's like, a no mana floating Naus from 20 life, or,
That sounds awful.
That sounds
like, yeah, I mean, I get it though. I get it. You got to take the opportunity to cast the spell when you can.
Oh, one of my favorite plays is the classic Red Explore. Cast Final Fortune, look at the top deck, and lose the game.
Let's go.
Okay, because I'm gonna ask you about those at some point. How Final Fortune affects.
Oh, I love them, and there's at least one effect I think is pretty core in a turbo deck. The two sorceries are a little more optional. So, as going more into the deck building, so something that has been happening recently and that has been changing the deck building a fair bit too is Wizards keeps printing OP cards.
Yeah, they do.
That are really, really blurring the line between like Turbo Naus WinCon and mid-range value piece. And the two cards that come to mind recently are Talion and the One Ring. Both of which, like, if you resolve, you generally are going to win the game, like with almost as much confidence as an Ad Nauseum.
Yeah, no, I can,
And so that's taken turbo deck building in an interesting direction that, again, it'll all tie back into the mid-range here at the end.
Before we go any further, I just want to say that's what 4 weeks in a row, 6 weeks in a row. That's one more for the counter.
Put a ding is somewhere in there. Like it is
up on the counter.
We don't plan to mention how much we hate the One Ring or like bring it up.
Oh,
it
no.
will just happen. It just happens.
I'm not in on this. I had no idea. The One Ring is just a broken magic card.
No, Sam had no idea. This is this fourth or fifth episode in a row where the One Rings come up like almost immediately upon discussion.
I'm sorry, listeners.
It's so omnipresent.
Yeah, sorry, listeners, but you're gonna keep hearing about it. It's the new Naus. So
we'll spare the diatribe of hatred this time, but no, I definitely agree with that. Like, it feels like they fit the very similar role of like, it's just the best value engine you can stick that will 100% either get you there or kill you. I have been in so many game situations where I look at my One Ring and go, this is gonna tick me for 5 on the next turn. I am at 15. Like, and there's creatures on the board that are swinging at me. This is disastrous.
Like, Ancient Tomb Mana Vault One Ring is a like keepable, possibly game-winning 3. Like,
yeah, oh for sure.
Like, it's disgusting. Sure. It's like it folds directly into the turbo plan. I'll come back around to the mid-range and all of that because that's new and that's current, and I'm still thinking and processing a lot of that stuff too. So it'll be fun to talk about. But to start, I wanted to go over just some of the stuff I hear about Naus numbers that is not quite true, and sort of like clear some stuff up, I think.
Oh, definitely. I think we'd all love to hear that.
I'm definitely curious on this as someone who has hardly looked at Naus because I'm like, I don't want to do that. I usually hear like 1.2, 1.3 as like you start to consider like Naus, or like that's a really good Naus curve.
And so, like, that's where the fallacy begins, is like that number.
I had a feeling,
Yep, that number that you see at the bottom box that says you're using Ad Nauseum. This like makes you feel all warm and fuzzy when it shows you a warm number. Don't listen to this number. It's terrible. And there's 2 reasons for it. So one, a lot of your deck's average CMC is determined by your land count. So since we've been cutting lands, the CMC is going to go up. Like that's sort of just going to happen.
Makes sense.
The other, I guess maybe even the more broad thing is that the goal of Ad Nauseum, this is going to be one of those dumb things that's going to make sense. The goal of Ad Nauseum is not to draw like any specific amount of cards. It's to draw cards that win you the game. and it doesn't really matter how many cards those are, right? Like if you cast Ad Nauseum and you've flipped like Dockside, Thoracle, Consult, Force of Wheel, Fierce Guardianship, Blue Pitch, like, you know, those 7 or 8 cards, whatever, like, you know, boom, you've won the game. Like, you don't need to do anything else. So the example I always like to cite for this is Simian Spirit Guide versus Rite of Flame. A lot of people will prefer, or they'll say Rite of Flame is like the better card in a turbo deck, the better ritual. It's, you know, lower mana cost, it's a little less scary, 3 is more than 2. Simian Spirit Guide is a significantly more flexible card though, where you don't need to channel it, you don't need a red to start, you're not locking yourself into 2 red. You know, doesn't trigger Ristics, it doesn't, like, you know, works under Rule of Law, all sorts of good stuff. And so between all that, like, Simian Spirit Guide actually turns out to be the far better card in the deck, like the one I would rather hit 99% of the time. And also its ability to start from 0 mana is massive too. So that also leads into, like, what are the other cards in your deck outside of the lands and those CMCs? And average is sort of misleading here too, because average averages all of your decks. So we've got the first deck list, Kali of the Vast, if you guys want to check it out. Well, you can actually all of them show this. You can scroll down and, like, the Roxai has an average of 1.38. Like, these are higher than a lot of people would say is a good Ad Nauseum number, but Bryant Cook's Roxai list is probably the best list at winning off of Ad Nauseum conceived in the format. Like, you know, I could be wrong on that. I just made that up, but I mean, it's up there, right?
A lot of people that know the name Bryant Cook know that this guy is like the Storm player. Yeah,
this guy is the Storm authority in Legacy, and he brought a lot of good knowledge and expertise in, I think, when he was building his Roxai list. So, Kali of the Vast. This is one of my lists. I love it. It is one of the most fun lists to ever pilot. It terrifies everybody who sees it. People don't like Ad Nauseum when they have 3 8-drops and a Doom Whisperer and a Bolas's Citadel in their deck.
That does strike me as a lot of life usage.
I have an idea I want to put forward before you give us the explanation.
Oh, yes. Let's hear it.
I think you're fine with that because you only need to hit one of these, right? That's the idea?
Yes, that's half of it.
Okay.
So yeah, you're exactly right, where, going back to our philosophy, we just need to draw cards that win us the game. And if Kalia is out already, and I cast Ad Nauseum, and I flip Razaketh, I just won the game. It doesn't matter that I just drew 1 card and took 8 damage, you know, to do so. And the other part is that you should really care more about the median mana cost in your deck, which is...
Okay.
Math people...
I see where we're going.
You see where we're going? Yeah, do I need...
Yeah.
People
Educate us.
Median
English speakers listening, I'm sure.
All right, so the median, I assume people know average, right? Add them all up, divide them by the number that you have. The median is instead, you organize them all, highest to lowest, and then you basically pick the number in the middle of that. That's going to be 1 in this deck, almost certainly. Maybe even 0. No, not 0. But yeah, it'll be 1. And so most of the time, you're going to be taking, on average, 1 damage. It's just every once in a while, you're going to get hard punished and take 8. But you'll cast tons of Ad Nauseums where you don't see any of those beaters. And something else to consider is, like, where are those cards going to be? This is similar with, you know, you can look at Inalla. There's some big wizards in there. There's a 7-drop Scholar of the Ages. There's the Tekro Necro. There's 4 and 5. But those are cards that in my game plan, I'm pretty actively trying to put in the graveyard. I'm pretty actively usually trying to tutor for one of these demons or dragons to put in my head, or I might entomb them. And so, you know, when all is said and done, like, on average in actual gameplay, I'm not hitting these cards that often. And even when I do hit them, it's not necessarily stopping me from winning the game, even. You know, turbo decks, or Ad Nauseum decks, have gotten very, very refined. Generally a good rule of thumb. Most Ad Nauseum decks will win the game with 25 life Naus and 1 mana floating when you cast it. And it doesn't really matter even if you have these big beaters in there, because, like, you know, you've got plenty of life to spare. Most of the time you'll have more than 25 life when you Naus.
Yeah, that strikes me as as really interesting, because it's kind of the same thing that I came across when I was running Math for Talion when that card was first spoiled. Is like, on paper it looks like 1 is the best number to name, but like then you look at the gameplay and in practice, like all the developmental spells, things that people are casting proactively is 2, and most of the interactive spells are 1. And so even though there's a lot of 1 costs and 1 numbers, they're also 2s based on their mana cost or their power and toughness. And so like all those interactive spells at 1, you aren't really seeing them until someone's trying to win the game. So yeah, definitely there's a huge difference there between like paper and practice.
Yeah, and so I did a little number crunching earlier. I'm going to stay away from most of the numbers. We'll keep it like relative, no spreadsheets. But I tweaked the deck a little bit, so now it's changed. But when I removed the 5 cards we were just talking about, my 4 Kalia cheat targets and the Bolas' Citadel, the average CMC of the deck, well, now it's a little off, but it dropped from 1.48 to 1.18, so now it probably drops to 1.2. And all of a sudden,
it's not a significant enough drop, I think, right?
Yeah, it should be about the same. So I'm going from like almost over 1.5 to like 1.2. And then that's when you can you're like, okay, we've eliminated some of the extremes. You know, that's actually a more accurate number to what I'm going to Naus than the 1.5 that's offset by these 5 massive outliers.
No, but the median thing you mentioned, as someone who has a bit of a mathy background, that just makes sense. Like I never even considered it that way, because every single time I've like considered Naus or I look at Naus, I'm like, okay, how many like big hits do we have? And yeah, it makes sense. Like when the vast majority of your CDH deck is like 0 to 2, you're only on average going to have like a handful of cards that are like 5+ CMC realistically, and for the most part, those are cards that you want to find. Like those are game-winning, game-changing, game plan cards. Like they're the reason you're in your deck for in the first place. This is just a means to get to it. Oh, and you also get extra goodies along the way too, I guess.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head there, where it's not like you run ad nauseam means you can't run these cards. It just means that there's sort of a higher burden on the card to be good in the deck. It has to justify the high cost, but like I don't think there is like a CMC that is unjustifiable in a Naus list.
What about Enter the 12 mana?
Isn't Enter 10?
No, Enter is 12.
Hold
It is
on.
12. It is 12.
I've never actually cast that spell for the mana, so hold on.
Yeah, no, every single time
Yeah.
I've seen the spell get cast, 0 mana was usually spent on it.
Yeah, that's true. I'm just curious about the justifications for Naus at 12.
8 and 4 blue. You know what?
Might be a little steep.
Might be a little steep, so...
All right,
Yeah,
we'll keep it to our 8 costs.
Yeah, okay, well, I'm kind of the opinion that PETA is not a playable CDH card in 2023, and Enter the Infinite is
I'm curious.
sort of just worse PETA, so...
I'm curious about the peer things, just a bit of a tangent, but because I know that like with Broodlord and stuff, and everyone trying to up their card quality, I know that the card has actually picked up steam. At least I feel like.
Yeah, so it does depend on your deck. Some decks do want it, or do actually need that as like the combo outlet with Hoarding Broodlord. I think so. There's a couple issues. So the first one is that Ad Nauseum has gotten better and better and better, and people have gotten better at using it and more refined with the decks. And it is, if you're a skilled pilot, it is almost impossible to whiff on an Ad Nauseum from like any reasonable life total if you play it properly. And the other is that with the printing of OBM. Do you guys have a dinger for that one too?
We haven't actually had that many problems with OBM in our area.
Yeah.
You have it? Oh my god, dude, it's my least favorite card. Damn it, dude, I hate it so much.
Yeah,
I
but
love- I love
team life total. No.
I
does-
love it. I love it so much. Atlas resolves a Ristic study. I go Bow Masters, and we stare at each other.
Yeah, and then no one else plays Magic, and it's not even their fault.
Yeah, just a little
Cast a
bit.
spell, I'll draw a card, you'll
okay.
take a damage.
You know what? If you guys, I'm gonna unleash the plague. All right. If you guys aren't complaining about OBM yet, then you guys need to tech in the Imposter mech and start playing un-OBMable OBMs.
Oh no! Trust me, I've seen Imposter Mech. That card's disgusting.
I hate that interaction so much, dude.
Oh, it's actually gross. It's so disgusting.
Un-OBMable OBMs.
It's literally like that's one of the parts I hate the most is the gameplay loop of OBM. That the best answer to OBM is another OBM, but that's not true. The best answer to an OBM is an un-OBMable OBM.
That's super correct.
It's like if you had a mental misstep that said the spell can't be countered. Anyway, tangent aside, I think between Deflecting Swat and OBM are 2 of the most played cards in our format, and both of them don't even stop you from winning the game. They just lose you the game in response to PETA. And so I think it's sort of a combination of like, I don't feel the need. I have not felt the need to run PETA in any of my decks for a long time. And like the punish, like the floor on the card is now, it's like dropping horrendously, where it's like, it used to be, oh, your opponent draws a whole bunch of cards. Now it's like, oh, you get nuked. Someone else loses their whole board. It just doesn't win you the game that much more often than Ad Nauseum. Like, you know, if theoretically PETA like approaches 100% winning the game when it resolves if you don't get OBM'd or swatted, right? But Ad Nauseum is still like above 90%, I think. And so am I willing to pay 2 more mana at sorcery speed and open myself up to those blowouts for like 5, 6, 7 more % of winning? Like, no.
That's a really concise way to put it. I think that's something that a lot of players need to consider. Like, but I guess my question is like, is it worth it like to run Pier if you're playing like this Broodlord combo or whatever?
I think that's a bit of a personal call. It depends on how the deck is built and like what options you have. Because mostly is, do you have other good Broodlord combos? Or
yeah,
I
can agree with that. I can agree with that.
But it's also sort of like, I think most people should, because like once you do the San half part, you just have 2 tutors that like you can, and 2 like floating black that you can convoke
do
with
whatever.
them. Yeah, like
I have never felt the need to cast Pier off of Broodlord when I was casting Broodlord, because literally like 2 tutors, 2 black mana, like one of them is realistically gonna be a sacrifice. I'm gonna make 8 mana off of this. You can win the game so many other ways. Like, you just use it as just a ritual outlet, you'll be just fine.
Yeah, if you just, instead of getting pity, you just tutor for Ad Nauseum, and you cast Ad Naus with, use Burnt Offering for your sacrifice, and you cast Naus with 2 red and a black floating, you almost certainly win the game. Like,
Yeah.
And you don't have to run, bad card.
Wow. Wow. No, I can agree. I think pre Bowmasters, I would have fired back and tried to defend PETA a little bit, but post Bowmasters, I agree. Like, the card it's just omnipresent at this point. It's a card that you always have to be considering, and I don't want to cast PETA right now. I think casting into the Infinite is like, unless you're like, I guess you're in blue, so you're always going to have the protection against Bowmasters, but like, I don't want to cast either of those cards right now. They just scare me.
Well, an OBM, because there's no safety text on the card whatsoever, has flash. So like, if you're playing blue and you bounce it, then they might just like OBM you right back and get another proc. Like,
The card is I promise.
Sure.
Disgusting.
Okay, but moving on. So what's the next step in Turbo Ad Naus in Commander?
So, yeah, we are slowly becoming more mid-range, which sucks.
The mid-range singularity,
which
baby.
sucks. The mid-range singularity. We are arriving.
Every deck is just getting closer and closer to blue farm. Like, it's not a good thing, guys.
I agree. It's not a good thing. Correct.
So, at the beginning, we talked about card quality and how you can't be drawing dead cards as a mid-range deck, right?
Yes.
So, you probably noticed, looking at some of these lists, the worst offender, unfortunately, is Inalla by quite a bit. They run a lot of dead cards. It does not feel good to draw an opener with, like, Finale of Promise and, like, just an Unearth and just, like, a hodgepodge of, you draw all the Reanimates, none of the Entombs. Like, unfortunately, the card quality in Inalla is not great.
I know that feeling well. I'm not even an Inalla player. I just know that feeling.
Yeah. Oh, you said baby pod? So like, is that a Naya core? Are you like on a?
So it is blood pod, but like mid-range turbo. Essentially, I'm looking to just resolve any sort of value-y stack C3 drop, and then I will just find my tutor like forcibly and just get there.
Oh, is it like a red farm, like Tana Timna?
No, it's Warnog and Max, the Stranger Things kid.
Fun.
Because Warnog is a infinite outlet in the command zone, and Max is a oftentimes 2 or free cost 3 drop that also draws me cards.
Oh, I'll have to peep the list. That sounds cool.
I would actually, having this conversation with you, I would love to get your input, but that's
math.
Yeah, I just want to run against your eyes and see what you think. No,
I'm super down.
Yeah, no, because I'm not.
I like mid-range. I've always been like a mid-range player. Like my favorite deck of all time is like Modern Jund, like Boomer Jund at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Because
I want to go to every matchup as close to 50-50 as possible. I want the difference in my cardboard and your cardboard to be not super far apart from each other, and that trade-off is always there's always going to be a deck that's going to crush you no matter what. In Jun's case, it was always Tron. You were always going to have a hard matchup against Tron. But for everything else, in such a wide-reaching format, you were always going to have like a pretty fair shot. Like you were going to beat your opponent down into fair Magic, and then you're going to beat them up in fair Magic because you're just better at them than it. But Commander has slowly turned me into I lean more on the faster side these days. I'm not really looking to try and make the games go long. I'm looking to, we got to speed this game up. We got to go a little bit faster.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see the sparks flying.
Yeah,
so
I like playing Magic, not watching people play Magic.
Yeah, well, I like watching people Magic play from time to time, but I get what you mean. So it's interesting because I definitely have had preconceptions on Naus, and I'm like, this all makes a lot of sense to me. And so my eyes are opening just a little bit.
I'm glad I'm making sense. I've been
yeah. No, everything I have heard so far has made sense to me. So
No, just being converted.
I'm not being converted. I'm not being converted. I might test it out, but I don't think I'm going to be converted. I think
Okay, so I think there's one card that you don't run Ad Nauseum with. Protean Hulk. Yeah. Do not pull Protean Hulk package cards with Ad Nauseum.
Yeah.
That is a non-bow.
I'm not on Hulk either. So
okay, that's cool.
It's all good.
Oh yeah, then slam the Naus. Put it in.
Okay.
Oh, please.
This is actually this is honestly, it's probably just an R shop thing. You've played at R shop a couple of times, but like, we're just hostile to Naus. Like you saying, oh yeah, I run Naus, and not being able to confidently say I am not on the card Ad Nauseum. Like there's social ramifications for that, right? In your experience?
I'm loud and proud about the Naus. I just accept that people punch me. Like, I roll up with Inalla. Like, I'm not fooling anyone. Like, actually, lately I've been on Mad Farm. That goes into sort of the mid-rangification of Turbo a little bit.
Yep.
So the dead cards, so at the moment, Inalla is no longer my tournament deck, unfortunately. I love it. It is my favorite deck. I'll bring it back at some point, for sure. Don't worry. I love it too much to not play it. But right now I'm running into this issue where, like, you guys are right. Top pods, good players, are very hostile to Turbo. Like, they know the tricks. And if I sit down across from 3 blue players, then all of them know what Spellseeker does. Like, it's, I'm in for a bad time. And to an extent, even if I mulligan well and I get a good hand and I play, as well as I can, I might still have a 0% chance to win that game. There may never be a window that I'm able to take advantage of. And so it's sort of come down to, like, Turbo decks need some kind of backup plan. For like pure Turbo, I've started moving to Mardu just because their like regular counter magic is not good enough to punch through on early turns anymore. Like, you need Grand Abolisher or Ranger Captain of Eos, like these, like one or silence, like these one for all pieces of interaction that say, like, if this resolves, I win.
Oh, Mad Farm's also, like, you have Tymna in the command zone like that. What better backup plan to have than casting the card Tymna? It's a great backup plan.
Yeah, the entire logic behind my deck choice is I'm gonna play a Turbo Naus deck with card draw and removal in the command zone.
I think that's a great philosophy. I think that's a fantastic philosophy.
It's been working well. I've been have not collected a 3-0 yet, but I've 2-1'd, I think, nearly every time I've brought it.
Damn.
It's I have started splashing a couple of mid-range cards. My favorite mid-range card by far is Bloodchief's Ascension. That tells you everything about me.
That card is cracked.
That's so good.
Card is sleeper cracked.
I won a match a couple weeks ago, or like there's like a stacks locked out board and I couldn't win, and I'm sitting there thinking about it for a long time, and I'm like, wait a minute, I have Grinding Station and I have a dock set and I have like Grinding Station and Bloodchief's Ascension on the board. I'm like, how can I get rid of all these stacks pieces? I'm like, wait a minute, I just cast the dock side and then use all the treasure tokens to just kill 2 players.
I love that.
With Grinding Station and Bloodchief Ascension. And I'm like, oh, now winning the game's easy.
Yeah, hold on. This card's kind of nice.
It is the mid-range killer, dude. So it's Better Sarah Ascendant, which is another one of my favorite, like, mid-range quote-unquote cards, I guess. Where it's a 1-mana card. It's super easy to invest into at any point in the game, and it just sits there and it says, all right, I now have the inevitability. Like, unless somebody makes a proactive play against me, I have paid 1 mana to just like win the game if it goes long enough. And like that's my threshold, I guess, for mid-range cards that I like to bring into my turbo lists.
I guess that makes sense when you're trying to have these cards.
Be as flexible with each other as possible. Like the individual power level of a card needs to be like at an utmost premium. Because these are cards that you're not tutoring for realistically. These are cards that just stumble into your hand and you go, well, I guess I'm doing this now, right? Yeah. That's the thinking.
And the Bloodchief Ascension is actually even better, like in Blue Farmer and Grixis, because you have Brain Freeze and Mnemonic Betrayal, which both just become combo pieces to win the game. So it's like it's a combo piece, it's a stacks piece. Like I've stopped like Malcolm Glinthorn. They're like, oh, you die before, or I die before you do, and I'm like, yep. Like, go ahead and try. All right. So
That's great.
Okay, many sidetracks. Card quality. So we have dead cards in Naus. That's just how it works. Our cards are also just not as good in the long game. Dark Ritual, very explosive. It's not going to help me 3 or 4 turns down the line unless I do something very good with it. So that's where we get to cutting lands. We need, in mid-range, your inconsistency, or at least like some degree of it, is going to come from flooding. And so since Turbo Naus decks have this added inconsistency to their mid-range plan from these rituals, from these odd combo pieces that a mid-range deck wouldn't run because their card quality sucks, we just make up for that by cutting lands. And when we have these just literally bonkers, insane draw engines that let you emulate a mid-range deck, like just on their own, like the One Ring, like, you know, classic stuff like Necropotence, like Talion if you have it, even stuff like Timna Jeska, just like, I win so many games just by drawing 2 cards every turn and blowing up my opponent's stuff every other round, like on curve. And you see so many cards that you get the 1 per turn you need, and there's no need to have any more than 1 per turn. Like, any more is a dead card. So you want to minimize the number that you see beyond that. And like also, you know, you hit a critical mass, 5, 6, 7 mana. There's, you know, you're not doing anything that costs more than 7 mana in your Turbo Naus deck.
You will be able to cast every single spell that you see, mark your words.
Yeah, exactly. And so, like, you know, there's not really a need to keep finding lands after that. And so it sort of works out to where you're sort of like overclocking a crappy PC to keep up with a good one, if that makes sense. We're just like...
No, that does.
We're spinning our rituals and our wheels and our OP card advantage engines fast enough to keep up with the, like, gradual value that the mid-range decks can amass.
So it seems like you've thought a lot about the counterplay to mid-range decks, and this probably has a lot to do with like the singularity that we talk about quite a bit, and then just the hell that everything is becoming, like you said, more Blue Farm-esque. But is that something that you deal with a lot in like your particular meta? Do you see a lot of mid-range that you have to, like, you as a dedicated turbo player have to worry about fighting against?
I am the only... I guess there's one other guy, but he doesn't show up to our weeklies very often. He occasionally will play in tournaments. Now, I'm the only dedicated turbo player at my store.
Interesting. Okay.
And even that is like I'm picking up this Timna Jeska, you know, like I'm falling. It's not good. And you know, it has to do with the card quality too. Just like, you know, at a certain point, a card is so good you put it in the deck no matter what kind of, like OBM. Like, you know, it's not a great turbo card, but it combos with the wheels and it's OP. So
card quality goes up. We love that.
And so yeah. So these, as more and more, like, we literally like lose slots in our CEDH decks whenever Wizards does this, right? Like OBM comes out and like every deck with black in it just loses a slot. And
you have to go, well, the Bowmasters needs to fit in here somewhere. Gotta figure out where to cut it.
Yeah.
I'm just looking forward to the day when the RC's like, guys, there are so many dedicated slots. I guess we got to expand the cap to 120 and I get to play Yorion. That's
Please,
all
no.
I want.
Yeah, I think that you should be allowed to play Yorion with 120 cards.
Thank you.
You know what? If you ever pod with me, bring your 20 card sideboard. I'll let you shuffle
Done.
up.
Done. I'll have it ready to go, locked and loaded. 4 extra lands and the other 16 cards.
What have you done? Oh no! That's the worst thing possible.
Well, I think he's making his deck less consistent, right? There's got to be one of his best cards.
I also agree. Just like, yeah, that's...
My card quality is high enough. I don't need it to be consistent.
As the format progresses more and more, I have so much respect for the 100 card rule. Like that is a fantastic deck building limitation. But it's also like you said, like every single time we get a new card, it's like, yep, this has to make the slot in. We're at like 20 must includes, not even in any color specifically. These are just, you have these 20 cards in your deck. Figure the 80 out.
Yeah, the One Ring is a card that you sort of... There's a handful of cards that I think of as like you need a reason not to play them rather than a reason to play them.
Mhm.
I have a good friend of mine is playing Niv Control, and he is on a breachless list. And I'm like, okay, you know, I can understand some of the thoughts here, but like Underworld Breach is arguably the best card in our format. You need a really good reason to not include it, right? Like you need to be... And that's where I'm sort of sitting at with the One Ring, where I'm like, okay, a deck needs a reason to not include it rather than a reason to.
Your reason is you just don't have one. The shop isn't allowing proxies. That's your reason.
Yeah, there you go. No, go buy the bundle off Amazon or whatever. They're throwing these things at people. They are still 50 or 30. No, this one's $56 on. All right.
Yeah, the ring is still expensive. It's still legal in every format. Still, it's wild what's happening with it.
Yeah, they're literally throwing them at people too. They were like in the gift bundles. They got reprinted in whatever the new is. Oh my goodness. Mid-range is, well, maybe not mid-range, but like green-based decks are finally getting a good card in that Legolas's card. Legolas's...
Oh, baby, let's go!
That card's kind of neat.
I'm excited for the first good blue card in a fat minute. That is Tishana's... Whoa! Don't laugh at... No. It's true.
Does Talion not count?
No, that's a blue-black card.
All right.
Yeah. He's gonna be able to play
it. Play mono blue. It's not a blue card, okay? That's a gold card.
Okay.
No, Tishana's Tidebinder. You seen this card spoiled for Mix-a-Lot?
Oh boy, I don't think so.
It is the same cost as Hull Breacher, so blue and 2. It is the same stats as Hull Breacher, so 3 and 2.
I don't like where you're going with this.
It has the same keyword as Hull Breacher, which is Flash.
Oh no.
And it says Stifle. Also, if the stifled effect belongs to an artifact, a creature, or a planeswalker, that permanent is Humility until Tishana's Tidebinder leaves the battlefield.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's really cool. The first good blue card in a minute. I'm very excited.
Card's kind of mid, not gonna lie. No, I'm joking. That card, I'm going to lose to this card.
You know what that card says? That says the One Ring loses indestructible and cannot be tapped. That's what that card says.
That says permanent. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm on board. All right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
the card's really cool. I'm really looking forward to that. But speaking of cards to look forward to, are there any new staples that you see coming out for Naus in the near future, like following spoilers and things like that?
Yeah, the deck building at this point, like, you have to be insane to stay on top of it all. It's ridiculous. That's okay. I have more questions. We can fill the time while you're trying to find your train of thought. Yeah, so I always view, like, the Naus player, the turbo player, as always the person that's, like, first to fire off in a pod. And I understand that, like, that's, like, not every single game, like, oh, I have Naus in my deck, I have to be the first one to fire. Like, I understand that's not the case. Like, how do you view, like, yourself in, like, as you said, the turbo player, how do you view yourself in most pods?
So you do have to, like, realize you are the threat, and people are going to treat you like the threat. But, like, there are ways to play around it. And a lot of the pod, like, a lot of it comes down to the pod comp, which is one of the things I'm really enjoying about Mad Farm, is that I can sort of look at the pod comp and I can say, okay, I have a valid turbo plan if that's what I think is best. I have a valid mid-range plan if that's what I think is best. Because there's pods where you want both. If you sit down and I'm looking at 3 mid-range decks, like, you know, I see triple blue, Tivit, Dawnwaker, Kenrith, something like that. Like, you know, I'm like, you know, my turbo win isn't resolving. Like, I'm going to play it a little low, and I'm going to go. So the most powerful play in CDH. Sorry, side tangent. This is, I guess, another sort of core of my deck building philosophy. There's no need to do 110% of a win. Like, putting in extra effort to do more than you need to is is inefficient. And so the most powerful play that you really ever need to make in CDH in 99.9% of circumstances is Cavern of Souls cast Grand Abolisher.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
There's really no need to try to do anything more powerful or more fancy than that. So I have a lot of my decks are sort of built with that, like, I can't, that's one thing. I think white, my conspiracy theory is that Mardu might be edging out Grixis.
White's a hell of a drug. It's a hell of a color.
As the better color dude, there's so many games where I'm sitting down with mid-range and I put down Grand Abolisher and they all look at their Flusterstorms and their Swan Songs and their, like, offer you can't refuse endurance. It doesn't matter. Just like there's so few spells that deal with Grand Abolisher, especially if it's with the protection of a cavern.
Mm-hmm. Like it's very, very hard to
Smite Big Trap or bust.
Basically.
Yeah, it's hard.
That's your only game plan.
Hard and subtlety. I have gotten subtletied before.
You've gotten subtletied? Oh man, that's awesome. I've been looking at subtlety, being like, man, maybe this card should be more considered for certain lists, but I haven't made the jump and I haven't seen anyone else do it yet. But that's awesome.
I don't know if I could recommend it, but it did work. It did the thing.
As someone who really likes pot affecting a one dropping, just being like, I can just get Grand Abolish right here and just pivot into wherever. Like I feel at home when I have cast Eldritch Evolution or Birthing Pod. I'm like, yep, every creature at my fingertips right now. That's exactly what I want. Grand Abolish is insane. The white cards are just insane. Like the amount of times that I just I get top deck silence. I'm like, oh, well, I try now, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
It's just insane. It's like, here's the button. You can now press it.
Yeah, and it's so. Yeah, Grand Abolisher in particular too is just like the ability to have 4 mana, go Grand Abolisher, Final Fortune, untap, win the game. Extra turn spells. That was something that you guys.
Oh yes, I know that they're good. At least people tell me they're good. Tell me why they're good.
Okay.
They say lose the game on them. That's why I'm very.
Well, you don't lose the game if you win the game. That's the cool part. So I've talked with you about the ladder of Grand Abolisher before, right? How Grand Abolisher is an insane card, and then we want that effect. So we're like, okay, I'll play Ranger, and then you don't have white, so you're like, oh, well, I guess I'm playing Defense Grid. And then, I went as deep as playing Malevolent Hermit for the backside at one point. Final Fortune is the ladder card for Dockside Extortionist. It does a couple other things, but that's really, the big idea, is that...
Tell me more.
So... Okay, so some Naus 101, when you're casting Ad Nauseum, the most often you are going to win with 3 cards, either Dockside Extortionist, Underworld Breach, or Final Fortune. Those are the 3, they all 2 mana. Final Fortune costs red, but the other 2 are just 1 and a red. And so if you're ever casting an Ad Naus, you almost always want to float red, and for that reason, casting Ad Naus with a floating red will work even as low as 20 life. Even in some greedy lists, you can get very, very close with it. And so yeah, to an extent, it's just for untapping your mana after a Naus, because you want to
win the game now.
Yeah, you want to win the game. If the Ad Nauseum resolved, then the Final Fortune is probably going off.
It's probably resolving as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, okay. No, I can get behind that. I can get behind that idea.
And so that's the reason that you'll see people run Warrior's Oath and Last Chance. Those are exclusively worse Dockside Extortionists. They're literally just oh, I need more mana to win the game. Sometimes you cast them to make an extra land drop. Sometimes you Vampiric Tutor and then cast it, and then you get to draw and untap and then go for the win. There's good use for it. Final Fortune though is also just an amazingly flexible card. One of my favorite things to do with it, and this is a great way for the turbo players out there, if you need to sneak a win past those filthy mid-range players, you wait for them to tap out on end step to activate Thrasios or Kinnan, whatever they're doing. You wait for them to tap out, and then they say go to mine, and you go Final Fortune, and you take a turn before they untap, and they're really sad.
That's super real. I've been gotten by that. I think I was gotten by that exactly once, and every time now, if I think that a Final Fortune or some other nutty end of turn play right before I untap is an option, I'm not holding exactly Force of Will or Pact of Negation or something like that. I just don't I have 2 draws with Kenrith. I'll make 1. I'll leave 4 mana available just for that exact reason, because it is so potent.
I have absolutely, so I haven't gotten that bad of fearing Final Fortune because I don't play blue, so I'm like, well, if it's happening, it's happening. We'll figure it out, I guess. I definitely slipped into the trap of I can tap out and crack these clues right now,
Or I can make sure I always open this Path to Exile or this other like removal spell in my hand in case someone tries to like sneak in past me. Like, let's just keep open the mana.
Yeah, there's another really big one is it punishes Cyclonic Rift incredibly hard. We were talking about the ability to be explosive. Control player taps out and puts every other permanent on the board in player's hands. You take a turn right there. You're winning the game. Like, you got 2 lands in play. Like, replay that Dockside Extortionist or that Mana Crypt they just put back in your hand. Like, you're having a good time. Like,
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It also gets around Ranger Captain too. Is one that I've seen it used for.
it gets around Ranger Captain. So a card that I haven't gotten to test yet. I need to get a copy, but it's one of the cards I'm sort of excited for the interaction with. Is Everybody Lives.
Everybody lives.
Have you guys seen it? It's a Doctor Who
It's
card.
a Doctor Who card. It's people were describing it as white heroic intervention.
Yeah, so the most interesting, if you're not playing Ad Nauseum, I don't think I would run it, because the best response to that card, well, you wait for it to resolve. But that card says players' life totals can't change. So if anyone else resolves it, I'm casting Ad Nauseum and I'm putting 90 cards in my hand.
Wait, hold on, that's insane.
Like, and it's not even like Angel's Grace or that sort of thing where you end at 1, or you can actually like lose the game immediately after whatever. Like, nope, your life total just can't change. Like, so that's pretty neat. And then playing around it with Final Fortune is also cool, where you can say either in response to somebody else's or whatever, but there's a lot of scenarios where you can say, okay, nobody wins the game this turn, I'm taking the next window.
Yeah. That's
So-
really cool.
I'm
So you're
actively
saying
become-
you would consider playing that in a Naus list, or you want someone else to play it for you?
If someone else plays it for me, I'm feeling so good. Like, it's like, don't cast that into a Naus. Like, if your opponent can cast Ad Nauseum, don't do it.
Don't cast the card.
I need to do some testing. I'm seriously considering it, because that's another thing where like, that's sort of a, White has wonky interaction, but like that's a really, really strong piece. I mean, you can obviously, there's many decks that can set up to win on an upkeep, but like I have genuinely not found a way to like win the game the same turn as the card that says, can't win the game, can't lose the game, players have hexproof, life totals can't change.
That's so funny. I actually have.
You have? Oh,
I have.
What's the tech?
Gitrog Monster. Those effects last until end of turn, and Cleanup Step, those effects fade.
Oh,
So
true.
if you have something that can create a Cleanup Step trigger, papa, you're in business.
Cool. Okay, so cleanup step.
Yeah.
Okay, in that case, like Necropotence decks and some other.
Yeah, they have.
Okay, yeah, there's definitely. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
You have wiggle room in that regards. I'm a big fan of like I'm gonna set up like 100 million treasures. I have a mayhem devil on the board.
Mm-hmm.
Pass.
Yeah, pass.
Yeah. Well, so like once.
Try and breathe. I will snipe you.
I will smite you.
Yeah, like in Inalla, for example, I've had people cast Angel's Grace, and I go, okay, cool. I'm gonna loot Praetor's Grasp and take all of your guys' libraries, right? Good luck. I win the game, right? But So the cleanup steps, but even that is like that's very specific. That is.
It's really unique. It doesn't come up frequently, but I've done it exactly once. Someone Angels graced me, and I was able to respond with some cleanup step shenanigans.
Drop with Kenrith and then get discard. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, I have one more little magic card I do want to talk about.
Oh, let's hear it.
So I think it ties in with the low land counts and stuff. I think this card's pretty gas.
I know what you're talking about. I was just gonna say.
Tide. Oh my
I know what card
God.
you're about to talk about, because we do have a dedicated Naus player at our shop. His name is John.
He has preached this card to me relentlessly, and I kind of see it.
Okay, so first off, like you start talking about this card in a vacuum, like that's a lot of text. What does it do? This is 1 mana, instant speed, draw 2 cards that you know what they are. Like, just in a vacuum, that is very good. Like, in 60 card it's insane. In Commander, I think it's even in CDH, I think it's still very serviceable.
Oh, yeah, the card is really strong. I've actually been considering playing a copy in my list as well, just shaving 1 more land for it, but I don't think I can quite get away with it, unfortunately.
Yeah. And so my list,
player, I need to drop a land every
like,
turn.
and so yeah, remember the theme. Like, a lot of our mana is in our artifacts, so we might, even if we're keeping up with mana every turn, it might not be through lands. So that's easy to catch up. We're on City of Traders. We're on Urza Saga. There's shenanigans you can do with fetches. This card is almost always live. You can almost always shenanigan away to tutor your cards. And then, like, if you have an opener that's like Command Tower, Fetch, and Tithe, you can, Command Tower, do your thing, whatever, play good Esper Sentinel, and then turn 1, like, play the fetch, or turn 2, I'm sorry, play the fetch, and then use the fetch, crack it if you need to go below land count, tap your command tower, cast Tithe, fetch the Badlands, tutor your plateau and your scrub, and all of a sudden you have like 19 lands left in your library on turn 2, and you are just going to draw all gas, and you have your land drops for the next 4 turns, or for the first 4 turns. Like, you are not worried about that at all. So
I like this episode is just like, oh, cool, I'm being slowly converted into turbo theory.
It's like a massive learning lesson. Yeah.
That's part of the reason why I wanted to do this episode. Is like me and you, Atlas, we talk shit on the turbo players of the world.
Oh, it's okay. We talk shit about you too.
And then, like everyone's talking shit about each other. Like, I think that's totally fair. But I do think that there is a point where you have to go, okay,
Explain the good parts to me. Like, where can I learn from this? And I think that is
way more important than anything else. Like, yeah, cast your ad nauseum, whatever. I still want to like know the theory behind it. It's just gonna make me better at fighting it.
Then
at the end of the day,
we can talk about some mid-range ad nauseum theory too, if you'd like.
I would love to, because I have always been a quiet proponent for the end step Nauseum.
Yes.
That's generally where I like to be. Like, I want to just ad nauseum, I want to draw whatever 10 cards, and I just want to continue going.
Yeah, so that is the thing, is you can jump almost all of the hurdles of ad nauseum just by casting it on Instep. That card says instant, you know? Like, it's good. And I think that it is especially powerful I think mid-range players should do this more. Because this is one of the like techniques that I use as a Naus player to get in wins that have gone past the early turns, and that is that ad nauseum is a fantastic decoy where you can end step it and you fight your counter war ever at ad nauseum, and either it resolves, and even if you only draw 5 to 10, like find a piece or two of interaction, find your land drop for that turn that you need to go off, find a rock, whatever it is, it doesn't have to be huge. Because you have basically just accrued enough resources. You have jumped yourself to that mid-range critical mass of resources that you need to force a win through if it's not countered. Or you fight the counter war, and then, oh, there's a big counter war of the win attempt. The next person to untap wins. Guess who that is? You know?
Oh, wait a minute. Did I just do that?
Yeah. And so I would, like, Tivit, I'm a big fan of ad nauseum, and I think you should play it even though you don't have red. You have none of the big 3 that get us those, main phase wins that we talked about, the Dockside, the Breach, or the Final Fortune, but just the ability to say, like, it's effectively taking 2 turns in a row, which is a very powerful thing to do in Magic. And like,
Time Walk's a good card.
Yeah, and these turbo decks will take it a step further. Like, when you need to force a win through in turbo, you can end step ad nause, untap, go for another win, that gets countered, you cast Final Fortune, you take another turn, and like, boom, you take 3 turns in a row, and your cards are like Underworld Breach, like Reanimate, all these cards buy each other back and just let you, build up for literally like 3 turns in a row where you can just hammer through any window that's open to you.
Okay. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense to me. Again, like a lot of the attempts in Baby Pod is like, I'm just gonna jam my window because I'm casting creatures. You are not interacting with creatures most of the time. Like, the one like non-creature that I need to cast, like, I've got another one way in the wings. Like, this is just like, if it lands, cool. If not, I'm gonna be trying again.
Yeah,
so like a lot of that makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's a lot of funnily enough, so my brother is a Naya player. He's a Minsk main.
Ooh, okay.
Ooh, yeah, and it is funny how much like Inalla and Minsk have in common. We have talked a lot of deck building theory together because we're like, wow, we're both these like, turbo decks with all these dead cards and a lot of the, without the interaction, without the stuff to keep up with proper mid-range decks. And so a lot of the theory does translate directly across, even though you might not think Naya and Grixis are similar color combinations.
I mean, the difference is like you're trading like counter spells for the white spells. That's the trade-off.
Yeah, and I mean, my favorite right now is these white interaction spells on the Rakdos engine, like Mardu. I'm loving it.
Oh god, white has some of the cleanest removal spells. I love white. Like Path to Exile, love it.
So
you're on Touch the Spirit Realm and anything you play white in?
I'm on Touch the Spirit Realm, yep.
Oh baby, Soul Partition, love it. Love these spells so much. It makes everything so much easier.
I had a great game so I had a Grand Abolisher out and nobody could remove it, but somebody had it was last week, somebody had the Dranith out that was preventing me from winning, and I'm looking at these 3 blue players and I'm like, well, they're gonna do their thing, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna channel Touch the Spirit Realm on end step targeting the thing, and they all just look at their counter magic and it's like, no, it doesn't matter, like Flusterstorm doesn't stop that.
Yep.
yeah, the deck is sort of that's unfortunately if you want to be like a more honest turbo player and not flex into these like mid-rangey lists like which ultimately accumulate and go play blue farm at some point. I do think white is where it's at. I think white is just so much better for getting those early wins.
Absolutely.
In an agree.
I agree.
Grix is probably still better color combination overall. Lots of OP cards over there, but I think for the way I play Magic, Mardu may be better.
What is like turbo at the end of the day? Like you mainly just need red in the color combination, right? Like you can like do turbo-y stuff, right?
Generally, you want to be on red-black, I think is the core. So I don't think people even use the acronym anymore. But for a while, the archetype was called Bad, Breach, Ad Nauseum, Dockside.
I remember that. Like when I first got into CDH, I heard the term Bad Anya, and I had to explain to him like, oh, that's just like turbo though.
Yeah, well, because that was before that even just became the de facto turbo deck. That was just like the core of cards that people built around. So that's basically what you need. There's sort of I should dig it out and give it to you guys. I do have a Naus primer, still a little bit work in progress, but I have a list of like, the staples, like your optional cards, what you want to, if you want to build your own Naus deck, how to incorporate the package into whatever list you may want.
Interesting.
But yeah, mostly the fast mana and the cards you mentioned.
Okay.
And Ad Nauseum.
And it all revolves around Ad Naus. Where Ad Naus is still like the best, like one of the like top 5 things to be doing in the format, you would say, right?
I
still feel like it kind of is.
I think so. Oh, you guys could do a podcast episode all on its own for that one. What are the 5 most powerful things to be doing in CDH right now?
There is only one answer. It is
Underworld
the
Breach.
One Ring.
The One Ring is up there. The One Ring is
the One Ring is like.
But no, I think it's probably like
easily
like
6.
Breach, the Ring, Naus, those 3 in no particular order. And then after that, Rhystic Study?
Rhystic Study? Yeah.
Rhystic Study, yep. Yeah, I would lump together Rhystic Study and Fish into like kind of the same category. They do different things, but they perform the same function of just draw cards for your opponent playing the game. They're the best things that do it.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of a cheaty answer to the question, but like more broadly, I guess there's like 3 good things I think you can do in CDH right now. I think you can play a black-red core and try to go fast. I think you can play a blue-black control core like Esper, and I think that you can play a blue-green like Neoform, Eldritch Evolution, mid-rangey Thrasios or Kenrith type list. And I think those are the big 3 sort of archetypes that aren't carried by an individual commander.
Yeah, that sounds pretty correct.
I can agree with that.
I think
agree with that. Yeah.
Most of the stuff that's tied in to like what's considered classically like at this point like top 16 like top tier commanders probably hits all those niches. I don't know.
There's a lot of decks that can overlap too. Like Blue Farm can do the blue-black or the red-black thing, like almost equally well.
Najeela. I was like Najeela does kind of like the green-blue, red-black thing.
Mm-hmm. Just does.
Yeah.
But they still run Grand Abolisher, right? Hopefully.
Yeah. Well, it's free. You're in white.
Yep. Oh my goodness. 5-color OP.
5-color is pretty OP.
Yeah. I haven't quite gotten there yet. I'm still stubborn on 4.
One day he'll tick up one more color and add those blue cards.
Probably.
I'm a big 3-color fan. I think that
I like 3-color a lot. Continue though.
I was gonna say I think that 3-color is like what you need to have a like complete, robust CEDH game plan. I think if you're in 1 or 2 colors, then to some extent you are relying on the power of your commander, which is like not inherently a bad thing, but like it's a weakness you need to be aware of, right? 3 colors is when you can have like a coherent 99 that plays the game.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I think like as we continue to see more and more stuff get released, I think that's gonna only continue to be the case, because as we get more and more of these, like we were saying, staple cards that just kind of delete slots in people's lists, you're gonna see more and more coherent 99 builds in 3, 4, and 5 color, whereas like in order to keep up with that, 1 color, 2 color commanders are gonna have to be substantially stronger.
Yeah. I know it's Boros, but like remember how, like, Winota had so much text, right? Like, that card is...
Winota's still a house. You still
Yeah.
have to be, like, prepared for
Yeah,
it.
yeah, it's still a relevant deck. It's a Boros deck, and they just put so much card text on that commander. Like, so anything can jump to being viable, but yeah.
Just the amount of words you want to print on a Magic card that are good.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, I think I'm just about tapped out here.
Yeah, thank you, Sam, for coming on the pod and chatting with us about Ad Nauseum.
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, the floor is yours if you got things you want to plug.
Oh boy, all right. So shoutouts to ABU Games, my local store. Come play in Boise if you're ever there. We do CDH on Thursdays. Shoutouts to the playtest group. If any of them are listening to it, I'll probably throw this in the Discord and say, hey, go listen to me talk about Ad Nauseum even more. They're a great help. They always generating good ideas. I think that's it for me. Oh, and I guess, yeah, find me on the internet. I'm Frosty or Frosty with an EH. I'm sure there'll be links somewhere around. You can go see all the deck lists we talked about.
Toss me
Yes.
the links you want to put in. They'll be in the description in the show notes.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, want to thank everybody for joining us. Sam, I loved having this conversation. I learned a lot. I gained some perspective I felt like I was missing. Atlas, as always, love talking Magic with you.
Been a pleasure as always.
All right.
Pleasure.
And to our listeners, we'll catch you next time.